Alright, good morning, and all that good jazz. Let's just jump into this. The difficulty of Pokemon games is a topic that I've touched on a few times before on this channel, most notably in my video called The Worst Parts of Every Pokemon Generation, where I criticized Generation 6 for being so mindlessly easy. A few people took issue with this, and I can actually see why. More often than not, it's difficult to make a claim that a video game is objectively hard or easy, especially with Pokemon where many people argue that you make your own difficulty depending on what Pokemon you use. For example, if you're playing Black and White, then the people who use Excadrill and Conkeldurr on their teams are going to have a significantly easier experience than those of you who used Maractus and Basculin, if you guys even exist. Just because some Pokemon are inherently better than others. I get that. Myself and many others saw Totem Lurantis from Sun and Moon as the evil reincarnation of Whitney's Miltank, but if you had a Torracat or Salazzle on your team, then you probably thought that battle was easier than tying the shoelaces on your Crocs. But before we get too in-depth on analyzing the differences in difficulty between Pokemon games, let's first ask why a good difficulty level is important to have in the first place. If a game is too easy, then it gets boring really fast. Veteran players won't want to play through because they feel like they're being ignored, and if the game is too hard, then new fans could easily be turned off by that. After all, any Pokemon game could be someone's first, which is why we tend to get the same 5 freaking tutorials in every game. So I understand why Game Freak has never gone off the deep end and made a Pokemon Dark Souls version or something. But in the past, they've proven that they could find a good balance between the two. Also, a huge part of Pokemon games is the replay value that each of them offers. With each region containing hundreds of Pokemon to collect and train, there are nearly infinite possibilities when it comes to replaying a game with a different Pokemon team every time. But in my humble opinion, this is why the replay value of Pokemon games has dropped drastically ever since Pokemon X and Y were released. Even without the EXP share or Mega Evolutions, the Generation 6 games, in my opinion, simply didn't provide any entertainment with their painfully easy battles. And don't worry, for those of you who don't believe me, I will be providing some examples quite soon. Moving on to Generation 7, the situation doesn't look much better. Yes, the Alola region did restore difficulty to many of the Pokemon battles, but the games became much easier in a different way, hand-holding through the overworld, as I'm sure you've heard multiple people bring it up before. The overworld and battles go together when creating a challenging experience. Sometimes it can be fun to figure out where you need to go or which NPC you need to talk to. Having Rotom mark every single checkpoint in the game on your minimap isn't convenient, it's just making the experience easier and quite honestly is removing a lot of the sense of adventure from the game. It feels more like you're on an expansive tour guide of the Alola region rather than an adventure. Having someone constantly tell you where to go is no more fun than stomping your way through every battle in the game. Then you have Let's Go, which are basically just like the Generation 1 Pokemon games, except you're constantly being guided around from checkpoint to checkpoint, making the experience feel much slower than what was presented in, say, Fire Red and Leaf Green. But that's a problem that's much more easily solvable than the actual Pokemon battles, so for the purpose of this video, we will only be talking about those. Let's just compare two Ice-type gym leaders from different generations. First is Candace from Pokemon Platinum, and the second is Wulfric from Pokemon X and Y. First of all, please ignore the difference in levels between their Pokemon, as level grinding and the overall amount of EXP in a region does not correlate with difficulty at all. Anyway, notice how Candace has 4 Pokemon and she's not even the final gym leader in Sinnoh, whereas Wulfric is the final gym leader of Kalos with only 3 Pokemon on his team. Notice that Wulfric's Abomasnow doesn't even know 4 moves, whereas Candace's Abomasnow carries Water Pulse and Focus Blast to cover her weaknesses to fire and rock types. Wulfric couldn't even be bothered to run Earthquake on his Avalugg. Instead, he runs Crunch, which doesn't cover any of his weaknesses. One of these characters is a trainer who is worthy of being a gym leader, while the other is a complete pushover, just a glorified NPC. If you don't think that's a good enough comparison, here's Maylene from Diamond and Pearl compared to Karina from X and Y. Both of them are the 3rd gym leader of their respective regions, and both of them specialize in fighting-type Pokemon. Again, please ignore the level difference as the Kalos region naturally has a much larger abundance of EXP. Once again, the Kalos gym leader doesn't even have 4 moves on any of her Pokemon. The only praise that I can give Karina is that she runs Rock Tomb on her Machoke just like Maylene does to cover a weakness to flying-type Pokemon. Besides that, Maylene's team simply outclasses Karina's in almost every other aspect. Heck, if you own a Ghost type, then you can defeat 2/3 of Karina's team for free, and that's pretty embarrassing for a gym leader. I use these comparisons to show my points because many people often reply to me saying, Pokemon has never been a hard game, we were just young and stupid back then, so we didn't know how to play. And if you're one of those people, then please, play through Pokemon Let's Go or any of the Generation 6 games, and then go play through Pokemon Platinum or Emerald afterwards. I guarantee that your viewpoint will will change, because the latter games certainly hold up in terms of difficulty even now. So again, why is this a big deal aside from the replay value and other points that I mentioned earlier? Because Pokemon is an incredibly complex game with an endless amount of strategies, and it's sad that many of the games don't capitalize on this. To beat Pokemon X or Y, the only thing you really needed to know was your very basic type matchups. I don't recall a single gym that utilized any of the game's other mechanics or pushed players to learn more than just type matchups. I'm not saying that you should learn how to EV train or IV breed or take a full-blown college class on the basics of competitive battling, because that's what the Battle Frontiers are for. Or at least what they used to be for. Take the Nacrene City Gym in Pokemon Black and White, for example. Even if you went to the next route ahead to catch a fighting-type Pokemon for an advantage in Lenora's normal-type Pokemon, Lenora's Watchog frequently uses the move Hypnosis to put you back in a disadvantaged state. This makes the player recall how Charon gives you Chesto Berries when you first enter the town, which are items that cure sleep. It forces the player to take held items into consideration and gives battles a little more depth than just type matchups. I know people hate when their friendly rivals give away items like these berries or revives, but since this is the beginning of the game where new players are just learning how to play, it's acceptable. The game is basically saying, hey, you might be new here, so here's a little technique that you can use, you'll just have to remember it later. It's like when the tutorial level of a platforming game teaches you how to wall jump or something. It's just some knowledge to test you on later when things get more difficult. Similar ideas show up in the Totem Pokemon battles in Alola, where you experience how status conditions, healing, and even weather can influence the outcome of a battle. And in that respect, I think they did a great job in bringing back some depth to Pokemon battling. But above all else, video games should always reward you with a sense of accomplishment. When I first beat Lance in Pokemon Gold, or Ultra Necrozma in Pokemon Ultra Sun, I popped off like I had just won the freaking Super Bowl. Or I guess Evo for my more nerdy viewers. When I beat Diantha in X and Y, my excitement was as comparable to catching a Zigzagoon. Pretty much anybody could have done that. In my childhood, I remembered it took weeks for me and my friends to beat Lance or Steven, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's how you're encouraged to learn more about the game. I remember Steven's Claydol giving me the hardest time in the world because it would just set up Reflect and Light Screen and completely shut down my team. So when I figured out that my Blaziken could just break through it with Brick Break, I thought, oh my god, I have the hugest brain in the world. It's important to have those challenges because it keeps people invested in the game. I'm gonna use one of my favorite Nintendo Switch games as an example, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's a game littered with tutorials for the first few chapters that I just kinda skipped through, but when I got to my first challenging boss fight, that's when I actually learned how to play the game and manage its incredibly complex battle system, even though it appears very simple on the surface, much like Pokemon is. Was it frustrating? Yeah. But worth it? Absolutely. If the game doesn't push you to learn anything new, then, well, I think Donkey summed it up best.
Every Pokemon has their own element, and you have to teach them the move Surf if you want to win.
Anyway, to close things off, I think I'll answer a fairly popular question. Do Pokemon games need a difficulty setting? Short answer, it would be nice, but I don't think it's a necessity. Like we covered at the beginning, Pokemon has sort of a choose your own difficulty based on which Pokemon you use type of thing going on. Which is fine as long as it implements some battles that are actively teaching you about the game that keeps both newcomers and veterans alike engaged. The main reason why I bring this up now is because I believe that after Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, games that were designed to bring in more casual fans and teach them about the core series of Pokemon, that Sword and Shield deserve to be on the more difficult side of the spectrum. After Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, I do have reason to be optimistic about the battles, but we'll still have to see if those games end up being any less hand-holdy, which is another topic that I may go more in depth on in a future video. Before we end off, I'd like to give a shout out to my good friend Sergi for redesigning my channel avatar that you've been seeing throughout this video. If you want to see some more great Pokemon artwork, then you can follow him on Twitter at Sergi Romero or at deviantart.com/SergiArt. I'd also like to mention that I recently did a video on Entity Mace's channel covering some interesting Pokemon anime trivia, and I was on a podcast with Mystic Umbreon, Hybrid Hero, and Jason Plays Pokemon, where we talked more about Pokemon Sword and Shield over on the Resort Originals channel. If you're interested in either of those things, then I'll leave the links in the description down below. Thanks for watching today's video, be sure to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys next time.